as the greatest, the grandest, the most audacious political experiment in the Western intellectual tradition. The United States of America is the beneficiary of this experiment. As an experiment, it can be ruined. My thesis is that the incursion of religion into politics in an attempt to influence public policy threatens and will damage the integrity of liberal democracy. I will argue further that persons of faith, for their own good, should be the most adamant about the separation of church and state. In particular, Christians have special reason, given the importance of freedom of conscience, to uphold my argument. As a philosopher, I must define my terms. What is liberal democracy? First, the noun democracy. The most relevant point about democracy for this debate is that democracy is an egalitarian political philosophy. That is, it affords equal intrinsic worth to each individual regardless of accidental attributes such as religion, race, or social class. Therefore, democracy is opposed to hierarchies and the unequal valuation of persons in the political process. Now the adjective liberal. Each individual on a liberal democracy should be afforded the maximum amount of freedom, that is, liberty, to live one's life as one sees best fit, up to the point where the exercise of that freedom infringes upon and inhibits others' ability to exercise their freedom. Together, liberal democracy is a political structure that does not advance any particular conception of moral goodness, but instead provides a value-neutral social framework to the greatest extent possible, in which individuals, you and I, choose our own values and our own conceptions of goodness. It is important to note that liberal democracy is a form of secularism directly and resolutely opposed to other forms of secularism, such as communism and fascism, where there is no conception of liberty and where the state can and does impose a conception of goodness, social harmony, or integrity of the organic whole on individuals' lives. In other words, I am talking about a specific form of secularism, liberal democracy. So the question, why is God and politics an unholy alliance? Because injecting God into politics is directly contrary to the very notion of liberal democracy. Let's look to the consequences of its opposite, some sort of theocracy, to see how this is so. First, injecting God and religion into politics will reintroduce hierarchies and non-egalitarianism into the political process. And with that, all of the discrimination, bigotry, and intolerance that goes along with it. A religion, by its very nature, is exclusive. Otherwise, it wouldn't exist as a recognizable and identifiable religion. Exclusivity entails differential valuation. The chosen people are of greater worth in the eyes of God and to the acolytes of that religion than the others. One only has to pick up a daily paper to see concrete examples of how this is so. In India, Hindus burn the homes of Christians, shouting, "Convert or die." Here in the United States, neo-Nazis call for the extermination of Jews based on God's will. Right-wing talk show hosts, evoking Christianity, rage against Muslims. In Georgia, the state of Georgia, where I went to graduate school, Baptists berate Mormons as the spawn of Satan. And also down near Temple Square, actually. Here in Utah, the subtext of Mormonism is that all other Christian denominations fall short of the truth. Only Mormons hold the full and restored gospel. You get the point, I hope. Religions, by their very essence, are non-egalitarian. They tend to foster differential valuation of people in the social structure, us and them. Us being worthy of more political clout than the other. The deification of politics is atavistic. It is a relapse to past primitivism which would demolish the accomplishments of liberal democracy. That is, to value each individual as a human being. What about the practical challenges posed by using religion as a guide for setting public policy? This is the third of three debates, and in this very room 18 months ago, I pointed out the uselessness of consulting the Bible for moral guidance using the example of a pious teenager wondering whether to enroll in college. Consider another example directly related to this debate about public policy. This is especially timely and relevant, I believe, because Sarah Palin's belief in God and the Bible has been cited by her supporters as more important than education and worldly experience. Imagine that this is a town hall meeting in Southern California. And the first agenda item is a rezoning proposal to turn formerly residential land into commercial land so that a Red Lobster franchise can be built. One individual stands up and shouts, "God hates crustaceans." and quotes from Leviticus. Anything in the seas or the streams that does not have fins and scales, they are detestable to you, and detestable they shall remain. Of their flesh you shall not eat. Everything in the waters that does not have fins and scales is detestable to you. We might think that this person is a little nuts. But the second item on the town hall meeting, the town council meeting, is a proposal to pass a proclamation in support of California Proposition 8, overturning the California Supreme Court's ruling legalizing gay marriage. In this instance, another individual, quote, stands up, voices support for the passing of the proclamation, this time quoting from the New Testament. God gave them up to degrading passions. Their women exchanged natural intercourse for unnatural, and in the same way also men, giving up natural intercourse with women, were consumed with passion for one another. Men committed shameless acts with men and received in their own persons the due penalty for their error. This person may not be considered so much of a nut. Why? Because the Leviticus passage seems totally out of context and irrelevant to modern life, whereas the Romans passage may be directly relevant. The likely explanation that anyone would give, myself as a secular humanist or Mark as a theist, would likely be that the prohibition against lobster and shrimp has to be understood in the context of the ancient world, and likely has something to do with dietary hazards, whereas the gay marriage issue is still relevant to the fundamental family structure of contemporary society. But this is secular reasoning. This is a secular explanation. So why not simply omit the superfluous theistic stage of rhetoric and get right to the real issues? The conclusion that I draw from the consideration of this example is that for religious principles to have any relevance in public policy debates, the proponents of various positions must be able to articulate those positions in non-denominational, non-sectarian language that the rest of us can understand. In contemporary pluralistic society, such as ours, persons of all kinds need to be able to engage in dialogue using the language and terminology that is generally understandable. Any religious precept whatsoever, any religious precept that has any value whatsoever for politics should be able to be articulated into secular language appropriate for open discussion in the public square. Otherwise, such precepts are so radically subjective that they have no more normative weight than shouting, "I like vanilla ice cream and I propose October 25th to be Vanilla Ice Cream Day." Thirdly and briefly, there is a benefit to pluralism for the common good. All political entities, all governments confront complicated and difficult problems. Political entities work best when there is a variety of different perspectives at the table. Such variety of perspectives, or diversity, if you will, facilitates the innovation of new solutions. In a pluralistic culture, politics works best if new perspectives are encouraged, not repressed. Religion, by its nature, is homogenizing. This homogenizing influence would be magnified if religion is allowed into the political process to any significant degree. Therefore, the homogenizing effect of religion in politics is antithetical to the common good. In conclusion, the political foundation of this country is liberal democracy inspired by the secular humanism of the European Enlightenment. Theocracy runs counter to the American tradition. The Constitution is a secular document. Human beings, by nature, are tribalistic, forming hierarchies and imputing more value on themselves than the others around them. It's human nature. Liberal democracy acts to mitigate these impulses towards inequality and discrimination by imputing equal intrinsic worth on each of us on the basis of our humanity rather than incidentals such as religious affiliation. But such egalitarianism is fragile. Allowing religious principles to influence public policy will shatter this fragile equality, demoting the others to secondary status to that of the religious hegemons. The result? The unwarranted corruption of liberal democracy by religiosity is atavistic. That is, it threatens to undo the greatest triumph of political philosophy in human history and exile us back to the primitive tribalism of the past. Thanks, Mark. I always enjoy listening to Mark's comments. Maybe that's why I keep saying yes to these debates. It's got to come to an end at some point. The entirety of Mark's argument is based on a false premise. That the secularism of liberal democracy, or government, as he put it, is a neutral worldview. Not so. I never made that claim, and it is based on a misunderstanding and equivocation between terms. This is what I mean. Mark equivocates incorrectly between a totalizing worldview, a worldview that is aimed at creating a whole picture of reality, such as Christianity, Sharia, as he mentioned, communism, or the natural science of Richard Dawkins. Those are totalizing worldviews. I agree. The secularism of liberal democracy is not a worldview. It is a political framework for persons who hold worldviews or groups that hold worldviews to live in. The secularism of liberal democracy does not intend or aim at creating a totalizing worldview in the sense of the others. Rather, it's a political philosophy, it's a political structure, it's a political process which allows people with worldviews to live and express themselves and live the lives they see best fit. Secondly, based on this equivocation, my opponent presents the worldview of natural science as on par or equivalent epistemologically to a theistic worldview, or at least his version of it. No less objectively true or no more objectively true than others. However, in my view, not all worldviews are created equally. Some are inconsistent, incoherent, and not backed up by evidence. Mark mentions the issue of the school curriculum, and I wasn't going to bring this up, but I think it's relevant given the narrative flow of this debate. Take the explanation of one of my students at Utah Valley University's, explanations at Utah Valley University of fossils in the Grand Canyon. According to him, a careful exegesis of events described in Genesis, and I researched this and he's correct, discloses that the age of the earth is 6,000 years old. Since basic geology suggests that sedimentary rock layers which form the walls of the Grand Canyon occurred over hundreds of millions of years, with fossils of now extinct organisms in layers tens of millions of years old, this worldview must be incorrect. According to him, Satan planted the fossils there to trick us. Now, given the fact that processes forming sedimentary rocks are observable, and the laws of evolution are explained by natural selection, explains the physiology of now non-existent organisms, what is the better explanation? What is the better worldview? I'll go with geology and argue that public education policy should not include in the geology curriculum the Satan hypothesis. Natural science is a worldview which is backed up by logic and empirical verifiability. It's a better foundation for public policy than superstition or myth. How much more time do I have? Another topic I wasn't going to bring up, but this kind of hits home because I watched my mother die 4 years ago. Euthanasia. As noble as the intentions of Mark and others might be to help you and me live our lives better according to his principles, I would like to be respected as an autonomous individual, to be competent to choose those values that I think constitute the good life. Using Christianity as an example of a template for end-of-life issues, euthanasia would generally be forbidden or discouraged. I believe, under certain circumstances, it is an affirmation of human life to die a dignified death rather than withering away and suffering needlessly. Now, no one ever claimed that this was a value-neutral position, as Mark did in his comments. My position on euthanasia is, it might be secular, but it's not value-neutral. It's based on the value of the autonomy of the human individual. It's based on the value that unnecessary suffering before inevitable death is bad, and it is based on the value that it may be more life-affirming to die a dignified death than lapsing into states of which you cannot do the things that formerly gave your life meaning. I don't want to impose these values on you or Mark or anyone else, but I want to be respected in the political structure that I live in, to be able to choose the values that I see best fit and not have the values of others foisted upon me and told me how I ought to live. I think that is disrespectful, frankly. Therefore, in Mark's opening comments, he spoke as if I and other secular humanists want to foist our worldview on you. Not so. I do not want to foist my worldview on you. I do not care, frankly, whether you are a monotheist, a polytheist, a pantheist, a panentheist, agnostic, or atheist. I respect you as an autonomous individual to decide for yourself the conception of moral goodness that you decide to live by, as long as you do not interfere with others' ability to do the same. A secular political framework of liberal democracy accomplishes better than any political system heretofore devised by human beings to achieve this end. Theocracy doesn't. Thank you.